can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms out. It's funny, usually when I do my offering right now, like I just did, something pops into my head. It says, this is what I'm going to say. And nothing popped into my head. So I guess I don't have much to say, which is actually kind of nice. You know, I think the silence is something that often gets overlooked at how important it is to spend time in silence. Anyone have a really hard time being in silence? I see a lot of smiles. No hands raised, but I'll take those smiles as equivalent to a raised hand. So for those of you who smile, why do you have difficulty being in silence? What do you think? I'm looking at the three biggest smiles I saw, and you know who you are. Why do you think? Go ahead, yeah.
I don't have difficulty so much in being in silence, but being, just not doing anything else and being in silence, that's the hard part.
So you can be silent while being busy, doing something.
Yeah, no radio, no TV, nothing
Right.
else.
But doing nothing and being silent is
It's a challenge.
a challenge. What else? Who has a hard time being in silence? No, not
That was a
you.
great
Behind you,
answer.
yeah.
Maybe thinking you have to fill in every minute with something, like sort of automatic. If you're not talking, you're thinking or doing something.
Right. Have you ever had conversations with people like that where they often think that there can't be that silence and it has to be a constant talking, that there's this uncomfortable feeling in silence? What else? Why uncomfortable in silence? Yeah, I see two hands in the back. You can fight over it. Char, go ahead.
I find myself getting lost in my thoughts, which is kind of scary. So,
The getting lost in the thoughts are scary, or the thoughts are scary?
both. Just like being able to like think things through, things that I don't want to think about just pop in my head.
Right.
That can be scary.
So when things pop in our head that we don't want to think about, what's something we can do to cope with that moment? Yeah.
Leave them alone.
Leave them alone? What does it mean to leave them alone?
To watch them and not engage with them.
To watch them and not engage with them?
Focus on the body.
Focus on, could be body, any present moment, anything. And what we tend to do is when the thoughts arise that we don't want to be with, we kind of get on them like a train, and like a train leaving Baltimore. We get on them and just kind of ride them out, and then we create more stories and more stories and more stories. The next thing you know, we're no longer in this present moment. We had one single thought, and we sat there for 2 hours creating the stories in our heads. And so as we are about to start the meditation practice, what we're really looking at is the ability to train the mind to come back to the present moment, so we don't run off with these thoughts that are constant. And that's really what training the mind, one of the benefits to me about training the mind and doing the meditation practice is the meditation itself doesn't fix anything, but the ability to learn to stay in the present moment keeps us from running with the scary thoughts. And that in itself can be extremely beneficial as we go through our days. Because if we've had unpleasant thoughts, scary thoughts, whatever it might be for a long period of time, it's going to be difficult for them to just stop or cease to exist. So for me as a practitioner, I don't try to stop the thoughts or even necessarily change the thoughts so much. Just recognize, become aware, and return to sensation of breath, right? Physical sensation, present moment, whatever it might be. So that's what we're going to practice. It's called meditation. Some of you might know something about it. Anyone here sitting for the first time ever? Good luck. So a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away, most likely. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is this not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. Sounds, you'll hear them, right? Phones ring, people cough, doors open. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. The practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Don't judge your practice. We judge things all day long. What we look like, what we wear, what we eat. We're constantly in these judgment modes. And so this practice is learning to go beyond judgment and just abide in sensation of breath. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often help slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you're on the benches or chairs, just trying to sit up straight. You want to be comfortable, but at the same time, be mindful and aware of your posture. I'll suggest closing the eyes if comfortable or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. If you need to move, simply move. If you need to cough, simply cough. If anything, you just woke somebody up, so thank you. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, they rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Return to breath. And with the body still, rested, the speech quiet, aware of all sound, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind. Whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us in this room, regardless of where we come from, or what we believe in, or where we think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. This is what we get every day. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. For most of us, the way we respond to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap, or the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and every other person you encounter, every moment of your entire life. That's why this practice is really easy. You just have to be nice to people. That's all it takes. Meditation is not an escape for those who might be new. All right? If you have a lot of madness in your life, 20 minutes of meditation doesn't fix the madness. I wish it was that simple. But what it does is it allows you to look at it a little calmer, a little more clear, a little kinder, a little gentler. It makes you become aware of the madness that might be in your life. And then you work to make changes in your life. So the madness decreases, ceases to exist. But as long as we're running around all day long, 1,000,000 miles an hour, doing 1,000,000 things, trying to stay busy, which is why that silence is very tough for some people. But when we can learn to just be silent and still and look at the nature of our own minds, then life gets a little simpler. We tend to complicate things very often. Buddhist practice, you can complicate it as well. There's so many numbers. There's the 3 this, and the 4 this, and the 5 this, and the 6 this, and the 8 this, and the 10 this. And it goes all the way up to like 350 of them. There's a lot of numbers, you know. Things to memorize, different languages, different cultures, different rituals, different people. You know. There's a lot of stuff that can really complicate even the Buddhist teachings. One of my favorite teachings of the Buddha is one where he gave a Dharma talk, and he held up a flower. And at that moment, it said that Mahakashyapa, one of the disciples of the Buddha, looked at the Buddha as the Buddha held the flower. No words were said. And at that moment, there was what's called in kind of a modern day mind-to-mind transmission of the Dharma. And that at that moment, Mahakashyapa was instantly awakened and understood everything that the Buddhist teachings was about. And yet he said nothing. And I find that to be so profound, especially for those who might like to try to think and analyze and figure stuff out. To me, that was when Buddhist practice really made sense to me. We all practice differently. We all explore Buddhist teachings differently. Different schools of Buddhism, they're all in essence teaching the same things, just different paths, different ways to get there. But for me as a practitioner, trying to approach Buddhism as the next thing that had to be figured out or understood or conquered or defeated or won, that was everything that drove me to Buddhist practice to begin with, because it drove me mad. So once I realized that, wow, there's nothing to figure out. I can drop all the labels, all the numbers, all the goals, all the objectives, I have to be the best at, I have to win, and I can just be present. And in that silence and in that present moment, so much of the world that one carries on the way to their shoulders falls away. And either way, you're still just left with the present moment. So sometimes maybe sit silently and look at a flower. That may be the greatest Buddhist teaching that exists. So what we call today, in kind of a Western context, you hear the word most often, Zen. In Chinese, it was Chan. It goes all the way back to the time the Buddha held up the flower. Mahakashyapa became the first patriarch of, again, what we call Zen Buddhism. The sixth patriarch was Hui Neng. It's a great sutra called the Platform Sutra on his teachings. Hui Neng was illiterate, but he was considered the wisest and the next in line to take that kind of place and hold that lineage. And then you get to the 28th patriarch, Bodhidharma, and he left India and brought the teachings into China, and then it became Chan. So Buddhism went into China with Bodhidharma, it was called Chan. And then as it entered into Japan, it became called Zen. Chan and Zen are the same thing. They both mean meditation. So I laugh because, and even we, I know I'll refer to it sometimes, we'll say Zen meditation. What you're really saying is meditation. But silence sometimes, if it scares you, if you're afraid of it, if you're uncomfortable with it, then explore it a lot. Within reason, of course, within what's healthy. Worked for a lot of years, a lot of people with trauma and things like that. Many people in this room maybe with trauma. So depending upon those situations, you always want to be careful with silence. But I'll leave it at that. I'd much rather just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with that I can address. Go from there. Yes.
You were talking a little bit on Saturday about karma
Mm.
and action and cause and effect. And it seems to me that no matter what action one takes, you're gonna cause someone suffering. So where do karma and good intention or right motivation intersect?
Right here. Karma, good intention, motivation intersect every moment. Always. One thing just to back up, to put into context, to kind of recap whatever I would have said on Saturday. For those who don't know the word karma, and then I'll get to kind of the question. The word karma means action. Right? Karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is not getting what you deserve. Karma is not do good and good happens, do bad and bad happens. Karma is simply the word action is what it means. And the Buddha taught very clearly we generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, and mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. Karma is in essence the law of cause and effect. Right? Everything we think, everything we say, and everything we do has an impact. Always has and always will. We tend to think of karma as, from a very, again, in a Western context, Western understanding of karma, I think it's a very selfish view where we think, what's my karma? What do I get? What do I not get? But karma is not about getting, karma is actually giving. What do you give? With your thoughts, with your words, and with your actions. So karma is what you bring into the world, right? To your question, which is interesting because you said, and I'll paraphrase it, but you started out by saying that karma, you said something to the effect of it's very difficult because everything you do is going to harm someone, or something like that, right? But that's not necessarily true. Right? Am I harming you right now?
Not at the moment, no.
Not at the moment, right? So what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and what I'm doing, because all 3 of those are happening right now. I'm thinking, what should I say? I'm speaking. I just said, what should I say? Now I just said, what should I say? And now I'm doing. I'm moving, I'm sitting, I'm engaging, I'm talking. That's my physical action, right? And at this moment, there's no harm being caused. Right?
Can I interrupt you?
Please.
Okay, so I'm thinking that at this particular moment in time, I've asked a question. You are responding to my question, and there is somebody in this room who is suffering and irritated by that question.
Probably.
So that's exactly what I'm getting.
That's a great example. Yeah. But there's, and that person is, the funny thing is that person who is suffering or irritated from your question is potentially the person who's heard or talked about or thought about karma 1,000,000 times. But because they don't understand it, they're irritated by it. It's like the person who says, I've heard the Four Noble Truths so many times. Do you have to talk about those again? Yes. Because if you're one who thinks you've heard the Four Noble Truths and doesn't and thinks that you've heard them enough, then you definitely don't understand them. That's a side note. But I understand the nature of your question. But what it sounds like is there's an awful lot of potential control that you might be wanting to have over who gets harmed or not harmed, right? So it really comes back to the second part of your question, which was really more of a statement, which is intention, motivation, karma, how do they all fit and play together? Well, all you can do is ask yourself, is what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and what I'm doing coming from a place of kindness, compassion, love, generosity, morality, patience, right? Or is it coming from a place of greed, anger, and ignorance? You can't control what other people do with what you bring into anything in your life, ever. So that's a great example to bring it here. And that's actually what's happening every moment of our lives with everyone we engage with, right? But their using that example, potential annoyance by your question, that's their mess, not yours. But ultimately, what would be the best way to make sure nobody is annoyed by anything you say?
To not speak at all.
To not speak at all. What would be the best way to make sure nobody is annoyed by how you move through the world?
To not move at all.
To not move at all. And what would be the best way to make sure that nobody gets harmed by your thoughts?
To not think at all.
To not think at all. Or to at least purify all thoughts. Right? So, purification of karma. Right? It said that when the Buddha awakened, what he did was he neutralized his karma. He sat in the most immovable position possible. Right? I often brush over kind of posture. I touch on it very briefly. And then I say, just find a comfortable position. If you need to move, move. But some schools of Buddhism, especially with the Zen practice, posture is very important. Right? To be very attentive, whether you're sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. But posture is important. It said that the Buddha sat in the most immovable position possible when he sat under the Bodhi tree for 21 days. Right? So neutralized physical karma. Speech karma, it was silent. And then you're left with the mind. And that the purification of the mental karma was so steady. That was it. But then he got up. And he taught for 45 years. Right? His intention was pure. His hours. His motivation was pure. His hours. We're not going to go through our world and not speak and not move, our lives and not speak and not move. And I don't know about you, but my mind is not getting neutral anytime remotely soon. By remotely soon, I mean like 1,000 years. So, as a practitioner, what I learned from the Buddhist teachings is just continue to look at intention and motivation. And it goes back to the kind of what you ended with, and the first thing I said is it all happens right now, at this moment, right? My intention is to respond to your question with as much wisdom and compassion as I can, and to understand that if in fact there are people who are annoyed by your question, then I hope that they can see through that annoyance and have compassion for you, who really wants to understand this. But I can't control that. If you're annoyed, I'm sorry. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Other thoughts, questions?
Isn't worrying about the consequences of your action attaching yourself to result?
Yeah, if we worry about the consequences of our action, or even just the, positive or, consequences I look at, not necessarily that you meant it this way, but consequences to me, we tend to think of it as negative or bad things, right? Opposite of consequences would be, I don't know, benefits, bonuses, whatever you want to call them. But yes, the idea with practice is to not attach to the outcome either way, good or bad. And that ultimately karma isn't good or bad. It's just the law of cause and effect, and things happen from those actions. And the practice of non-attachment is to not attach to the outcome or expectations that we might have on what we think and what we say and what we do. Because all we can focus on is our words, our thoughts, our actions. Yeah. And that's not easy. Anyone here do anything ever and have some expectation of what's going to come from it? That's why we're all here. But that's the practice, is to overcome that, to move through that, to have less of that. Again, that's where the training of the mind to be present is very beneficial. This is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm saying, this is what I'm doing. Question? Oh. Other thoughts, questions?
I have a thought. It's super random. So when I was meditating, today, so you know your thoughts go over, right? So I was thinking about being older, like 90s old. And so in my head, and I was like, well, what if, what if all my friends or whomever, like they die, and I thought to myself, I was like, this is what I'm left with, like this, like my consciousness.
This, like,
Yeah, you know what I mean, like this is it, like it's not gonna change from then, you know what I mean? My grandpa, before he passed, he said that he always felt 28, mentally. Obviously his body wasn't that, but I just had that thought of just like sitting with myself, and this is like, the more comfortable that I can get with my consciousness, how it is now, if I can cultivate peace and serenity and like let go of expectations and to not be so hard on myself and all that stuff, then I think I'm ahead of the game, because I'm not going anywhere. You know what I mean?
Right, your mind is always gonna be right here,
Right. Like,
or wherever it is, but
it's not gonna change. I don't think I'm gonna become like so, extra smart. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's gonna change that much. So it's kind of a random thought of being like just sitting with myself, and I mean everything is temporary in life, but my mind.
yeah.
is-
Yeah, I mean, one of the Buddhist core teachings is that he said we have birth, we have aging, we have sickness, we have death. And, his teachings are not on how to make sure the body stays young forever, because it won't happen, right? His teachings are on how to train the mind and how to be present and how to be grateful and appreciative for what we have in each moment. And like you said, my father always used to say age, or still says, but age is a state of mind. So when you said that, that's what I thought of, I'm like 16. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's where it's at, And that consciousness, and if you look at it from very traditional Buddhist teachings, even when the physical form goes and the physical form passes and ceases to exist, that consciousness you're referring to keeps going. So the consciousness doesn't even stop when the body stops. And if you look at it from the other direction, the consciousness has been going for a long time. And here it is right now. And that's why, to me, I always learned that learning the Buddhist teachings, in this kind of, as a human, is incredible, because we have this opportunity to really embrace the teachings and take care of the consciousness that we have. It's a really rare, precious gift, It's one of my favorite kind of Buddhist stories. Pete, you could probably tell better than I can, because I'm terrible at telling stories, and Alex just told it the other night, but there's a kind of teaching where the Buddha said that, like, the odds of being human, right? You know the story, right? The turtle in the ocean. There's like, you got like this little piece of wood floating in the ocean, right? It's small. And you have a turtle floating in the ocean. And once every 100 years, the turtle pops his head up, or her head up. And the odds of being human is the same odds as that turtle popping their head up through that one hole in the ocean, right? The story's typically told much better. I'll work on it. You know that one, right? You've heard it. No? Yeah. But it's rare. That's the point. Okay? So we have this rare, precious consciousness that is in this human form, and we can do a lot of good with that. So, yeah. Other thoughts, questions, meditation, this practice, anything you're sitting with.
I'm starting to read a book about curiosity, and I'm just kind of thinking, well, how does that word fit with the
Curiosity.
Yeah.
So you're starting to read a book about curiosity, and you're curious to know how it fits. The Buddhist teachings, and curiosity obviously can be defined different ways, so whatever that means to you, but the Buddha was very clear to not believe what he said just because he said it. He said, question everything. Try it. Put it into your life. To me, that is kind of curiosity. So when I began, and the first book I read, or one of the early books that I read on Buddhism, when I really began to practice, and there was a chapter titled How to Practice Buddhism. And it was really based around this, right? And the book talked about questioning everything, but questioning it by practicing it. Meaning, be curious. If I am kind to people, will that make my life and the life of those around me better? So, well, here, I'm curious. Will this work? I'm curious if I am patient. Will that make my life and the life of those around me better? I was curious about that. I was curious that if I continued to be greedy and angry, would I continue to suffer more? Yep. So I was curious about all of these teachings. And the Buddhist teachings really talk about having great faith in the path, in the Dharma. And my master would say, have great doubt as well. Challenge it, put it into practice, be curious. And then hopefully in time, curiosity goes away. Yeah, it works. So I think early on, curiosity is important. And then I find, with a lot of people I've been around for many years, that I think curiosity he was a smart guy, that Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha. And I trust his wisdom well over mine. So I'm no longer curious, just struggling to practice, Yeah. Curiosity. Other thoughts, questions? Yeah. Hi.
You were mentioning earlier about how everything was intersecting right now.
Yeah.
This is more of a thought of an experience. I want to share about a question. This is only my second time coming to one of these things, and everything that the first lady and the first gentleman here tend to ask questions, and the way you answered them was exactly that. It was everything intersecting, everything I needed to hear right now. And without realizing it, the people in this room have helped me tonight, and I just want to share that and share some appreciation that it was all intersecting right here, right now, just by being able to. So thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And I'll kind of close with this thought, to put it into kind of Buddhist context. What you just described, at the beginning we take refuge. Like, are you brand new to Buddhism? Pretty much.
I've read books for years and
Okay.
I've actually practiced it.
All right, so the concepts are not brand new to you. So the idea of Sangha, for those who might be brand new, at the beginning when we take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, we find comfort, safety, protection in the triple gem, and also known as the three treasures. Sangha is what you just described, and that's the community, the people that come together to inspire, motivate, challenge, annoy, and it's funny because there are certain things that happen where, if you are dealing with family or friends or people in the outside world, and they come up to you and you're like Pete, you're really greedy and angry, and you don't know me, and you're just a stranger, and I'm a stranger. Well, it wouldn't for you, but you know, it might make you mad. You know, if a stranger walked up to you and told you you're a greedy, angry, ignorant person, we don't like hearing that. But you do that in Sangha, you do that in community, you do that in a Buddhist temple, and people are like, oh, thank you. Right? So there's something about being able to kind of be very honest and genuine with where we're at on this path and practice to kind of motivate and inspire each other and to call each other out. You know, I remember years ago, I was in an argument with somebody and I said, it's just how I am. And he said, well, maybe you should change how you are. And he was right, you know? But if somebody else had said that in a different context at that time, I probably wouldn't have responded the same way. So, you know, I really appreciate you sharing that for everyone and just kind of wanted to put it in some context for those who might be new that, and that's the beauty. It's like so many times, so this is going to end here in a moment or two, right? And you have no idea how many times this ends, and then somebody comes up and says, I didn't want to ask this out there. You know, so we've just spent an hour here. And then they come up and they're like, I didn't want to ask you this there, but can you explain to me the entire process of rebirth or whatever it might be? Like, yeah, let me just sum that up for you in 60 seconds. What I try to remind people is that always, if you have a question, if you're curious about something, I promise you somebody else in this room is probably thinking the same thing, right? So it's good to share, it's good to express, it's good to kind of get over or out of this shell that we often think that what we're thinking or saying is maybe inappropriate or wrong, or that we're the only ones, you know. We are all sitting in a room filled with unenlightened people. And there's no place I'd rather be, so thanks for being here. So we'll join palms and we'll close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Papa Hatch during his time of rebirth, and to Morgan, Blair, Christine, and their entire family in their time of suffering. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering.